Buying a home is one of the biggest decisions that most Americans will make. And there are many parts to a real estate transaction. One of the critical pieces is title insurance. And today, that's what we're going to learn about and talk about with one of the prominent title sales representatives here in the Southern California area. We'll be right back with Kevin Sales. This is Daryl Williams. We have Kevin Sales here on the spot, and I'm excited to have him here. And we're going to start off our questioning with learning something about Kevin. That how long has he been a title representative, and how did he get involved with the title business?
Good question. So how long I've been a title rep? I have been working for title companies since 1999. That's when I first started working at a title insurance company, and I've been doing so consistently ever since then. The way I got involved is I had a banking and lending background, and the first title company that I went to work for was looking for someone to be the training manager and to roll out new systems to the company, and I was hired for that purpose. Title insurance covers the ownership rights to the property. So the house, for instance, if you have a fire or a windstorm or a rain or a leak, pipe burst, something like that, those things are really covered by your homeowner's insurance. But title insurance covers the ownership rights to the land and anything affixed to the land, anything secured to that land.
What are some of the common issues that come up?
Definitely the most common issue that comes up when we're doing title insurance and closing a real estate transaction would be liens against the property. If it's a sale transaction, the seller might have a loan, they might have a judgment that's against the property, they might have a lien from the city that's against the property. And those are things that obviously as a buyer, you wouldn't want those things to be on the property. You want to get the property free and clear of those liens, meaning those liens being gone when you purchase the property. So for sure, the most common thing that we see as a lien against title insurance or an issue in that title insurance would be liens of the seller. That's definitely the most common thing.
Errors in public records. How often does that occur?
So errors in public records, how often does that occur? That's an interesting question, so I'm going to answer it two ways.
Yes, sir.
Errors where the public record has a problem, like missing something or maybe showing something in the wrong order, that's not necessarily that common. But what is common is errors caused by the people recording something. So for instance,
mistakes.
Yes, mistakes. We record a deed and someone, a lot of times people will do something like that. Maybe they're putting their property in a trust or they're adding their child on title, anything like that. And they do it without proper advice or counsel or without a professional creating those documents. So we see transactions where they make an error in the legal description, which is how a document records against a property, or they make an error in some other way. They put a typo in the name of the person. Those types of errors do happen, and I come across those very, very frequently, especially when people are doing things themselves and not consulting a professional like a title company or an escrow company or a law firm. Those problems are most common when an individual is doing things themselves and not consulting a proper professional.
I've been involved in transactions where someone purchased a property, and right after purchasing that property, right after 6 months later, they decided to change the name on the title.
Okay.
You grant the title over to someone else. Does that insurance policy still cover that property when you change the ownership after the transaction is closed?
So when you change ownership of a property after buying a property and having a title insurance in one name, can you change the name and still have your title insurance coverage? It depends. So I highly recommend that if you're going to do a change to your ownership, that you check with the title company. For instance, nowadays, more recently, ever since about 2013, I believe it is, the policies that are issued generally give you coverage if you buy as an individual in your name and you're putting the property in your trust. Generally, you may have coverage there still and you don't have to worry about anything. Whereas if you bought the property in an LLC and now you're putting it in your individual name, or you bought it in an LLC and now you're putting it in a trust, you may not have coverage. So it's really important that if someone were going to do a transfer of the title after buying a property and after getting title insurance, they should consult with their title company to see, will our title insurance coverage continue if we do this transfer?
When a buyer purchases a house, what happens if you look at the closing statement, there's usually two title charges on there, which is interesting. One is a lender's policy,
yes,
and the other is a owner's policy. Explain the differences between those policies to us.
Absolutely. That's a very good question. When there's a sale of real property, there are two policies that we close. So the reason when you have a closing, you'll see two policies is because one is the owner's policy and one is the lender's policy. Typically in Southern California, and it's not always this way, but typically the seller pays for the owner's policy. That owner's policy is the policy that covers the buyer. It gives the buyer protection so that the buyer knows that they have title insurance coverage. The lender's policy is the one that covers the lender, and typically the buyer will see that policy on their closing statement. That policy covers the lender. See, both the buyer and the lender are new to this property.
Right.
They're coming into this property. Both the buyer and lender are giving money to either put a loan on the property or to purchase the property. And so both the buyer and lender want to be covered or should want to be covered and be given title insurance for that. The example I always use is, would you want to buy a house and have the seller's IRS lien on the property and the seller's loan doesn't get removed from the property?
Of course not.
You wouldn't, because that means those liens are against your property and those liens are taking away your rights to that property. So the buyer, which is the owner's policy, and the lender, which is the loan policy, both get a policy at the close of a sale transaction.
All right, that's useful information, Kevin. Let me ask you something else that I'm not that familiar with, and I've been in the business for 30 plus years. I could be embarrassed to say that. But what is a municipal lien search and what is that all about? And when does a title company do that? Or is that something that's elected by the borrower or buyer?
A municipal lien search, and when does it happen, is a very good question. So a municipal lien search is part of our title search process. When we do a search on a property, either for a financing transaction or for a sale transaction, we're going to search the public records to see what types of liens and encumbrances and other issues may affect this property. The municipal lien search is the search for liens from municipalities. For instance, it could be a lien from a city, from a county, etc. Those are local government agencies that may put a lien against a property for various
like water bills.
That's correct. It could be a water bill. Sewer bill. It could be a water or sewer bill. It could be something like a city lien where there's a substandard situation or an unpermitted situation that's going on at the property and they file a lien for that, and various different types of things that cities will cite you for. Those typically have a municipal lien that go along with them.
How do title companies determine how much coverage or how much insurance they're going to issue you?
That's excellent. And we actually don't make that determination. The determination is made by the transaction. So the owner's policy goes along with the sales price, and the loan policy goes along with the loan amount that's given. So based on the sales price and the loan amount, that's how we determine the policy that's issued.
So when it comes to coverage, let's say that an heir came from nowhere in terms of an estate, and they said, hey, this property, I got evidence it's supposed to have gone to me, and hey, I want my property or I want money for it. How would a title company go about defending that?
Yeah, so
to what amount of money? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. When I first got into title, I started reading on different cases because I was doing training. I want to have great examples, and one of the cases that I had was similar to that. So the question being, an old owner, an old heir comes in and says, I didn't get my money from this property, or I was supposed to get this property. They're going to file a lawsuit.
Right.
And when they file that lawsuit, the buyer who purchased that property, assuming they purchased the property from the estate, they're going to file a title claim, with their title insurance company.
Yes, sir.
And the title insurance company is going to step in and defend that. And through the lawsuit and through that title claim process, they'll determine, is it a valid claim or is it not? But what happens is the title company steps in and they have to defend that situation.
And how much money would the title company spend defending that? That's the big ticket. Would it be, what if the case cost $200,000-$300,000? Would the title company fork out all of that money or keep defending it? How would that work?
There have certainly been claims where the title company has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a claim situations, a claim scenario. So the title company, it goes up to the limit of the policy. So if it's a policy for a $500,000 purchase, that's how much coverage they get. So the title company, I'm not on the claim side, but it's kind of like any type of insurance claim. They're going to look at the situation and determine what's the best way to do it. Give you an example. When you get in a car accident, the insurance company is going to say, okay, what's the best thing to do here? Do we pay to have the car fixed? Or is it better just to give you a check and just that car is totaled? It's a total loss. Yeah.
Excellent.
And so as a title company, they're going to look at the scenario and say, what's the best way to make everyone whole that is supposed to be whole as part of the situation and resolve the scenario?
Now, I know that one of the things that the title company does is search the public records, right?
That's correct.
They're looking for, things like liens and encumbrances and stuff like that, so they can determine what kind of risk they'll have if they write an insurance policy against this property. The title company searches these depositories. Do they maintain and keep their own records, the different title companies?
So how do title companies get their records, and do they keep their own records? So property ownership, everything is evidenced by the public record. Part of, and I'm not an attorney, but part of legalities are that when you buy a property, you want that evidenced on the public record. So it gets recorded with the county recorder. When things record with the county recorder, they're indexed. And us title companies, we have access to, we call it the title plant. So we have access to the title plant where all of these public record documents are indexed. That's how we can go find out if someone has a judgment against them, or if there was a loan put on the property, or if the property was sold last month, etc. Because those documents, as they record with the county recorder, they get indexed and posted at the title plant. And that's where we go to find those records and see what happened on the public record.
Okay. How do title companies deal with unrecorded documents? Let's say documents you can't find, but they are still valid.
Yeah.
Right? So how do they deal with that if somebody comes up later and says, hey, I got this this trust deed where I loaned this person some money and I want that money?
Yeah. Well, unrecorded documents, that's a very good question. How do we deal with unrecorded documents? But unrecorded documents can be a problem. I read in a legal document years ago that if you don't record a document, I believe the term that was used was you are not imparting constructive notice. And if you don't impart constructive notice, you can be not, I was going to say violating, but that's not the right word. You can be jeopardizing your rights. So for instance, in the example you said, if someone has a trust deed, which is a loan, and they don't record it, they could be jeopardizing their ability to collect on that loan because they don't record the loan. That loan is not a lien against that property. So unrecorded documents can be an issue at times, but generally speaking, people that have a document should record them because otherwise they're not imparting constructive notice and they could be jeopardizing whatever right they have from that document.
If you purchase a property all cash, you don't need title insurance. Is that true?
So need is an interesting word. There's no law that says you have to have title insurance, but me personally, knowing what I know, being in this industry for 30 plus years now, I would never buy a property without title insurance. The only way I would take a property or receive a property without title insurance is if my own father or mother gave it to me. Other than that, if I'm getting it from anyone else, I would always want title insurance. And here's why. First of all, let's follow the example of the big money. There's no bank that's ever going to loan money to someone without getting title insurance. So if the bank is smart enough to know we need title insurance before we give this money for this loan, maybe we should follow that example, number one. But number two, when I buy a property or if I'm getting a property, I want to make sure that, first of all, I know about any liens that are on there if I'm going to take it with the liens on it. But normally I'm buying a property and making sure those liens are taken care of. That title insurance policy covers me for making sure that those liens are taken care of. And so that's why I think, even though it's not a law that you have to have title insurance, someone would not be making a smart decision in my mind if they buy a property and they're not getting title insurance.
All right, Kevin, we're going to talk about what's called in the business encroachments. And, it's basically somebody building or placing something on someone else's land. Now, Do you recommend a survey when somebody purchases a house like in an urban area, or when would you think a survey would be useful?
That's a very good question. When is a survey useful, and is it necessary in a regular urban developed area in California? In California, we have a Subdivision Map Act, which typically makes it so that a survey is not necessarily required when you're buying a property. But I will say that and in other states, they don't necessarily have that. In some states, they get a survey every time they even do a refinance. So in California, it's not common that on regular transactions, if someone buying a house in an urban area that's developed, that they get a survey. Certainly when you're out in outlying areas, more rural areas, or where it's larger pieces of land or undeveloped areas, you're buying acres or vacant land, it's much more common to get a survey with those type of properties. Typically in more urban developed areas, we see surveys when there's a question about we're unsure where the property line is, or when there's hillside property and maybe the properties are not, regular rectangle lots and they're trying to figure out exactly where the property lines are. Then it is more common to see someone get a survey to be certain where that property line is.
Okay, Kevin, we're going to go ahead and land the plane, as they say. And what I want to ask you is, what information in reference to title and title searches have you learned that that will be very beneficial to someone that either is going to buy a house or currently own a house? What have I not asked you that would be very good, useful, valuable information for the listeners?
That's a great question. And for all the listeners, everyone viewing this video, this is what I'll say. If you are buying a home, refinancing, putting a property in your name, inheriting a property, anything of that nature, I highly recommend that you get proper advice, legal advice when necessary, tax advice when necessary, and work with professionals that do this for a living and know and understand their job and their role. Some of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is because they do things on their own, or they had bad advice or bad professionals that they were working with. And you can prevent a lot of the problems by working with people that know the job and know what they're doing.